My abusive ex-wife tried to F up my life, but my buddy saved the day. When my wife and I split up, I won full custody of our young son. She had mental health issues and refused to take medication. When we appeared before the judge, my wife started screaming and crying. I felt sorry for her, but I couldn't let my child grow up in that kind of environment. My wife and I got married in our young 20s, and I didn't know any better at the time. Her whole family self-medicates with alcohol and drugs. I used to be a stoner but gave it up when our son was born. For a while, my wife kicked her bad habits. She didn't drink or smoke anymore. At our son's third birthday party, my wife got very drunk. I remember thinking she should stay away from the birthday candles or she might catch on fire. After that, my wife started visiting her family on weekends and would always come home drunker than a skunk. I hated that our son had to see his mother stumbling around and slurring her words. I didn't know what to do, so I asked my buddy. He agreed that it was no situation for a kid. I decided to ask my wife to cut off her relationship with her family. My wife got angry and started yelling. My son was asleep in the next room, but the walls of our trailer were thin. He woke up crying and came out to the living room. I'll never forget the sight of him standing there holding his stuffed bear and rubbing his eyes while my wife screamed angrily at me. I knew that my son couldn't grow up like this. So, I packed up my son's clothes and toys and moved in with my buddy for a while. Fast forward to 3 years later, and I was building a new life for me and my son. I even had a new girlfriend. She was a good stepmom to my son. We still lived in the same town, but I rarely saw my wife or her family anymore. She was not welcome in my new home, and part of me hoped my son could forget about that side of the family. I was working nights as a security guard at the mall. It made good money, and I could take my son to school when I got off work in the mornings. A couple of weeks ago, I pulled up to the house and my new girlfriend was standing out front with a police officer. My stomach dropped, and the worst thoughts ran through my mind. It turned out that my son was missing. He had disappeared overnight and his bedroom window was left open. I knew it had to be my ex-wife or her family. They were unpredictable and selfish. I called my ex-wife, and she said that she had taken our son and was leaving town. The police found her at a local shelter. Unfortunately, state law prevented the police from taking my son back while they were staying in a shelter. I was furious and spent all day at the attorney's office. There was nothing that could be done, even though I had full custody. Sometimes the law is stupid and protects the wrong people. I worried about my son all night while I worked, and couldn't sleep during the day. My wife's mental health and addictions made her unpredictable, and I worried my son would be emotionally scarred. Was he even getting enough food? There was no way to know what was going on. I just stood and stared at my son's bed all day, his old teddy bear lying on top of the pillow. It broke my heart. How could I get him back? This went on for a week, but it felt like an eternity. My new girlfriend was worried for me. She said I had dark circles under my eyes, and I was losing weight, but I couldn't eat or sleep. One night, I was sitting at work, holding my head in my hands and trying to think of a plan, like every night since my son was kidnapped by his mother. My phone buzzed, and I checked the screen. It was my buddy calling. I almost didn't answer, but decided I better in case my friend needed help. He knew I worked nights and wouldn't call without a good reason. Man, was I glad I answered. My buddy was at Walmart. It was around 9 p.m. He said my ex-wife was shopping and had my son with her. I asked my buddy to follow them and I would drive right over. It took me 10 minutes to get across town. I was driving as fast as I could and hoped no one pulled me over. If I had seen flashing lights, I probably wouldn't have stopped. All I could think about was getting my son back. My buddy called me as I drove. He said that my ex-wife was checking out, but he wouldn't let them leave. When I pulled into the Walmart parking lot a few minutes later, I scanned the cars to find my son. It didn't take long because there was a crowd forming around the commotion. My ex-wife was screaming angrily and shoving my buddy. He had parked his pickup truck behind her beat-up minivan so she couldn't leave. My eyes scanned the scene for my son, praying he was safe. I spotted him through the windshield of the minivan. His eyes were big with fright. While my ex was distracted, I jumped out of my car and ran to the passenger door of the minivan. I pulled it open so hard, the door banged against the cart return next to it. I didn't care. My son was safe. I pulled him into my arms and held him tightly, running back to my car. My buddy saw me and waved. He left my ex-wife still yelling and shaking her fists, and roared off in his pickup truck. Somehow, he had kept from laying a hand on her the entire confrontation. I was so angry, I wanted to beat somebody up, but mostly I was just thankful to have my son back. I was also thankful to have a friend who was looking out for my family. Someday, I hope I can do something to return the favor.